Welcome to the Duelyst Ranged Tutorial Deck Guide tutorial deck. Fuck it. My name is Duelyst Rogue. This video is brought to you as a reward for my beautiful supporters who have reached the 100% of the quarterly goal for the second quarter of 2015. Great job, guys. This guide may be actually released a little prematurely, but I know you will reach 100%. You guys are the best. Because the Venar wipe is coming, really exciting time in Duelyst history, where people will get all their money back from whichever deck they were using, and it will be the perfect time for them, now that they have a clean slate, to build a ranged Vetruvian deck. So I am releasing this guide to tell you why you should do it, and how to do it exactly. As with my previous Lionar guide, this will be so much more than just a card list. I will share all the intricacies of this deck and all the ways in which you can modify your deck in ways that suit you best. Because, you know, if this was recorded by someone like, I don't know, Arlek J or so many really good deck builders in Duelyst community, God, they would tell you every single card that you should put in there, absolutely optimized. Now, me, I'm not that good at deck building. I am more of a get in there and win with superior tactics kind of guy. So I will tell you which cards are the absolute core of the deck, and there will be a ton of room for personalization, for customization. If you are lacking certain cards because you didn't get them in your packs and you don't have the spirit to enchant them, it's okay, because I will share with you just a lot of modifications that you can do. And of course, because I will share the general idea of the deck, a flexible idea of how to play it, it will be more timeless, because as the metagame shifts, as cards get nerfed and changed and new cards are introduced, because you will understand the general idea of the deck, you will be able to implement it in your own way with card modifications that still live up to the spirit of what I will share with you. Now, this deck is not the absolute strongest shit in the current metagame or any metagame, but it is consistently winning. I was playing it pretty much since the last wipe, which makes for at least a month. I don't rightfully remember, but since that time, for over a month, the metagame was shifting. The Songhai was on the top, the Lionar was on the top, now the Abyssian is on the top. God knows, maybe Venar will be on the top later, but the fact remains, I stayed at a consistent 80% win rate on the ladder. I'm a good player, but you can totally pull off an 80% win rate with this deck. It's a good deck, and I managed to rank third in an Ash and Fire to Ash, I think it was called, tournament, with some solid players in it. And I've been doing decent in tournaments with my legendary bad luck sometimes, but it's fine. It's a good deck. It's not the best, but it's good. The real reason to play it is not because it's totally OP in the current metagame or in any metagame. No, the real reason to play this deck is because it's very exciting to play. It produces incredible games. It produces games that are super entertaining. There's a ton of variety, crazy shit happening because of the creative ranged playstyle you will be demonstrating. It's fun for you to play. It's fun to play against. Your opponents will enjoy the games as well. You're not gonna be the asshole that just ruffle stomps everyone with a combo that can't be played against. It's gonna be fun games all around, and also because the deck is difficult to play, it will teach you the intricacies of positioning and tactical depth that you had no idea about. Before this deck, I played Lionar, and compared to this deck that I will share with you, Lionar is complete face roll. You basically just put your face on the keyboard and put your leg on the mouse, click random shit, and then victory comes out when you play Lionar. Here, you actually have to use your brain. You need to think about positioning in ways you never had to before. It's really tricky, and after a month or two of playing this deck, you will become a way better player than you ever thought you could be. This deck will teach you such depth of gameplay that it will serve you for the rest of your Duelyst career, basically. The metagame will change, and this deck may fall out of fashion, but the skills you will acquire playing it for this month will teach you something for the rest of the Duelyst existence. So it's really good stuff, and you should totally pick it up now that it's in the beta. Now the game is still in the beta. It's good stuff. I love this deck. It's so fun to play. So the general idea of the deck is you want to stay away from your opponent, and you have Blast for ranged combat. Like you can see the Pyromancer here is going to be obviously the Staff of Ikir and Wildfire and combo, and then you've got your Scarabs. You stay away from your opponent and just dish out consistent damage and trade efficiently. And then you've got things that can finish off your opponent from the distance, like the Nemesis or Serix, and the Rasha's Curse and the Star's Fury is used for lethal damage from range as well. So I say ranged deck. I don't have a fucking single ranged minion in this. Yeah, seriously, not a single ranged minion. Because it's not just about being in range. A lot of people make this mistake where they just, I want a ranged deck, and then they just put in those really crappy things like they put in the, where are they? The Veil Hunter. This is a 1 damage, like seriously 1 damage, you're gonna pay for 1 damage. And then they put in their Sworn Avengers, and then they get silenced, and they are a 1/2 as well, except more expensive. And then they put in their Fire Spirit is actually still so expensive. And then they play, there wasn't even more, yeah, the Rogue Warden. And then they just get removed by Phoenix Fire, and it's just so inefficient. Don't play those ranged minions in your Vetruvian ranged deck. It's just not what it's supposed to do. It's too inefficient. It's not worth it. You will just lose. I have never once lost to a ranged deck playing my Vetruvian, because it's just those shooting minions just don't work. Maybe they will get buffed in the future, and then you will put them in. For now, look at this freaking Scarab, man. It costs 5, same as the 4/3 Warden. The 4/3 Warden costs 5. Okay, and this guy has 4/7 stats. You silence him, the enemy silences him, you still got a 4/7 minion for brawling. It's brilliant. It's so good. Songhai has those damaging spells. They struggle removing minions with big health. How do they deal with this Scarab? It's ridiculously good. It's so efficient with its traits. The idea of the deck is ranged, but it's also efficiency. That's the core idea. So now the nitty-gritty, the core of the deck. What must you absolutely have? What should you disenchant everything and craft with your spirit for this deck to even work? In this state of the metagame, on 24th of April, and probably for plenty of months since now, unless one of those cards get horribly nerfed or changed or removed from the game. This is what you absolutely need for this deck. Triple Siphon Energy. Why? Dispel for free. Dispel is incredibly good against Abyssian, because Abyssian is basically the only other faction that can match you in ranged. And with the Deathwatch combos, like the Priestess that deals 2 damage to you, and the Siphon Energy is your answer. It's your ranged removal, because this deck has removal in form of the Entropic Decay, and where you need to stand next to the enemy minion. It has situational removal with the Star's Fury. Sometimes you can blast things, but this is basically your main source of removal, and because it can work in range, rather than, you know, the decay that works only when you stand next to something, it's great for those ranged combats. If someone tries to take a ranged engagement against you and runs away from you, Siphon Energy is so often the key to victory. Also in the early and mid game, it gives you really good momentum because it costs 0, and your deck doesn't struggle with card draw. You never will struggle with card draw, like almost never, really. So having a 0 cost card that improves your momentum in the early to mid game is also very important, because if you have a really strong late game with this deck, and if you fall behind early, it's sometimes hard to come back, and this will make sure you don't fall behind early too often. It's really good all around, and you want 3 of them. Yeah, you really want 3 of them, not 2, not 1, just 3. It's good enough. It's that good. Rasha's Curse, it got buffed. What the fuck were they thinking? I was thinking how OP that was before. Now it destroys only 1 artifact, but it costs 1. It's ridiculously good. Not just for artifact destruction. It's not, don't think like, oh, I'm not struggling against artifacts, I should play only 2 Rasha's Curse, or maybe I should remove it. No, you shouldn't. It's not for artifact destruction. Artifact destruction is the secondary effect. The primary effect is summoning that dervish. It is your crucial piece of ranged combat. With the Dune casters, you will sometimes be able to spawn a 6/6 minion right in the enemy's face, which is just, this is another core of this deck, by the way. Even after the nerf, the Dune caster is still worth it, in my opinion. Russia's Curse Dune caster is a brilliant combo to spawn a gigantic minion in the enemy's face. You need 3 of them. It makes this deck work. It's so often. This is also one of the primary reasons why I am always winning the ranged engagements. When an enemy is spawning a fragile minion behind the hero in long range, Russia's Curse is your removal against that minion. You spawn it next to the general and you just whack that minion in the face. So important. Science First Wish, I expect this to be nerfed soon, so keep an eye, but in its current state, absolutely you're gonna take 3. For only a cost of 1, it draws you a card as well, so it's brilliant for sifting through your deck, and a friendly minion gets +1/+1, it's a great all-around solid buff. You should prioritize your blast minions with this, of course, and also the Sand Howlers, because they cannot be targeted with spells. It's really good stuff. So 3 Science Wish, absolute must-have in your deck right now. And then Dunecaster, as I said, also core of this deck, just too damn efficient to let go. Even if you're not playing a fully Dervish deck, you still have enough Dervish for this to be totally worth it, with the Russia's Curse, with the Star's Fury, definitely. Pyromancers, for a long time, I've been using only 1 of them, only 2 of them, only 3 I've been experimenting without them. But in the end, I decided the 3 is the absolute core of this deck. It's basically your dream come true opening. You want to open with a Pyromancer behind you, never in front of you. Don't grab that mana if you are going second. Play the Pyromancer behind you, even if you're going second. Just leave that mana there. But it's a great opening. It's so damn good. And in the late game, it does fall off, and you want to recycle them. But for the best opening you can get, yeah, it's totally worth it. Take 3. You want those for your openings. Unless maybe in the future there will be a card introduced that gives you a better opening that fits with this deck. But for now, this is the best you can get. It's really good. Get 3. Wildfire Ankh. Now, this is the core of the deck, yes. Your general gains blast. Brilliant. It's absolutely important. But I would say it's just as good to take two of them as it is to get 3 of them. The problem with the Wildfire Ankh is that once you get 1 of them, the second one you really don't need. The second one is a wasted card draw. You can get 2 Pyromancers and be happy about it, but you're never happy about getting 2 Wildfire Ankhs into your hand or onto your hero. It just doesn't do anything. It doesn't stack in any meaningful way. So that's why it would be perfectly understandable if you maybe can't afford 3, because it's not the cheapest card. It would be completely understandable if you just grab 2 of them, and it still works. I had a lot of success with this deck when it had 2, but after certain cards were nerfed, I no longer had a good idea of what to do with my openings. I needed to reinforce my early game. So I added the 3rd one to increase the chances of me drawing this in the early game and having a really good opening when I can blast away from the very get-go. But it's really up to you. You can get 2 of them and then maybe get 1 Obelisk if you want a cheaper version of the deck, but 2 of them at least is the core. Sandhowler in its current state is just very all-around solid and efficient minion. It cannot be targeted with spells, and that's a really big deal, because this game is very removal-oriented, and if you can get this 3/3 and then play a Dunecaster on it, and then give it a +1/+1 from your first wish, then suddenly you're getting a really big minion. It happens really often. There's rarely a game goes by when I don't get a 5/5 Howler with my Dunecaster combo, and it's a great combo in some matchups. Like, in some matchups they can deal with it, like Abyssian with the Assassin, it deals 4 damage instantly, but what the hell is Songhai supposed to do? What the hell is Vetruvian supposed to do? Lionar, they really struggle against this 5/5 guy. It's good, solid, all-around, muscly combo, so yes, even if you are mostly ranged, most of the time you will still spend entangled in direct combat with people. with maybe some units supporting you from range with blast, but you will still be brawling a whole lot, and this is your main brawler. It's really good, and it also reinforces your openings a lot. When you're going second, grabbing mana with this guy is really good stuff. Staff of Ikir is the core of this deck, and I think you should have 3. Unlike Wildfire Ankh, they stack with each other, so that's why 3 is a good idea. Maybe 2 if you have other ideas for your deck, but it's really great because you combo it with Wildfire Ankh to get 5 damage blasting attacks. When you get those 5 damage blasting attacks, it is sometimes game winning in and of itself. Sometimes your opponents just, if your opponent doesn't have an answer, you win the game right there and then if you get this lucky with the card draw. And even if not, then it combos with Osirix if you have one, because then you equip up to 2 artifacts from your deck, which means there's a decent chance you will grab your Wildfire Ankh Staff of Ikir combo immediately from Osirix. Really good stuff. And you can also just keep it in your hand until you draw the Ankh in the mid or late game, and it will give you one more option to get really good lethal. And even on its own, it's really good because the weakness of this ranged Vetruvian deck is getting bogged down in and out-muscled in direct combat, and this just adds a little bit of muscle. So sometimes the enemy hero will think twice before trading with you. Sometimes it will allow you to remove those minions that are overwhelming you in close range. I really like the fact that this 5 damage is exactly enough to kill the Lionar Knight. Because Lionar, I've been really struggling with Lionar in the beginning stages of this deck, and as I added 3 Staffs of Ikir, it became, and 3 silences from the Siphon Energy, it became much easier to deal with Lionar. I'm not sure how relevant Lionar will be in your metagame, but the Staff of Ikir is really good for brawling and removing minions that you don't like, that are right in your face, and the combo with the blasting artifact is just too damn good to let go. Entropic Decay, you kind of need it to... Sometimes you just gotta kill a minion or lose the game. Sometimes it's the choice between those two. So I got 2 Decays because I want to stay away from the enemy whenever I can. So it's a destruction only when I stand next to an enemy minion, and I want to mostly stay away. That's why I get only 2 of them, but I would not blame you if you took 3 Entropic Decays and you would still get good results with them. Because they just really help to stay alive. They really do. Star's Fury. Now, I realize a lot of people play around them, placing all their minions in a row or next to the end zone to play around Star's Fury, to not spawn the dervishes. So here's the reason you should play 3 of them. Yes, if you are playing a Portal Guardian and Dervish deck, don't play that many Star's Furies, but you are playing a ranged Blast deck. And the funny thing about Blast is that it very handily convinces people to spread all of their minions between all the 5 lanes, so that no more than 1 can be blasted at the same time. And the combo between Blast, any kind of Blast, and Star's Fury just puts such a gigantic smile on your face and makes your opponents scratch their heads so hard. Because, you know, how the fuck do you play against both? If you put your guys in a row against Star's Fury, they all get blasted. So if you already have Blast on the board, then they will always spread their minions. And then Star's Fury gives you like 8, 10, sometimes like 10 or 12 damage against the enemy hero straight up. Sometimes it just straight up kills them. Sometimes it gives you a brilliant board wipe because they were already trying to play around Blast. In combination with Blast, this thing gets ridiculous. And in the late game, this is your hope, your lethal damage. It's really important to have it in your late game for lethal, for long range lethal. And then in the early game, it's also your comeback potential. Many times, I was completely crushed by a really powerful early game. Sometimes someone just draws really well and dumps a ton of minions on the board in the early game, grabs all the mana nodes, etc. And then Star's Fury is basically more powerful with the more minions your enemy has. So sometimes it equalizes the mid game after your opponent got a much better early game. And that kind of comeback potential is really important as well. It's great against Abyssian as well, and Abyssian seems to be rocking the current metagame, because Abyssian tends to summon a lot of minions, and then you get a lot of dervishes from the Stars Fury. It's really good. I know people play around it, but they cannot play against this and Blast both. That's why you should have 3. If you can't afford it, okay, have 2, but 2 is the absolute minimum in my opinion to make this deck work. Now the Scarab is the absolute linchpin of your mid and late game. You should have 3, because they are really good all around. Even without the Blast, the 4-7 stats are just ridiculous. I totally expect them to get nerfed, but until they do, have 3 of them. They are very cheap, so there's no problem crafting 3. Have 3. Aymara Healer, even after the nerf, is still extremely potent, extremely important to have. I know it's super expensive, but if you have any... after crafting the other core things, like the Wildfire Ankh, if you have any spirit left, you should invest it in Aymara. It's more important than the Nemesis, it's more important than the Ozorix, it's more important than the Time Warp spell for 8. It's the most important of all your legendaries, and I'm not sure if you should have 3, because you already have 3 Scarabs, and 3 Scarabs are really good. I guess... It could be argued that 3 Aymara could be better than 2 Aymara Ozorix, but I like to have a variety of options for your late game, because sometimes Aymara will not give you lethal, because the engagements will happen long range, and Aymara is a short range brawler, whereas Dark Nemesis and Ozorix excel at long range combat, because their effects work wherever the opponent is. So I like to have Dark Nemesis and Ozorix for my lethal options in the late game. It's basically my finishers. They're not the core of the deck. They're important because you want to have lethal options. But if you come up with other lethal options because you got something else from your packs, I can totally understand. So now we are going into the non-essential, non-core part of the deck, the flexible part of the deck. I will tell you the reasons behind the cards I chose, but you can choose different ones with similar ideas. The Dark Nemesis and Ozorix basically are my finishers. They are my win conditions. They allow me to win in long range. I basically just run away and put passive pressure on the opponent by playing the Nemesis so they take damage every turn. I drop the Ozorix, and then next turn I get to fly up and punch them for 8. And even if they remove the Ozorix, I'm gonna get my Wildfire Ankh, the Staff of Akir combo. I've been very skeptical about Ozorix because I've never seen anyone play it until I tried it out. But when I did, he gave me awesome results, and really, I'm super happy with him. And I've removed my Maelstrom, the Time Maelstrom, because it seemed too expensive. And the problem with the Time Maelstrom is that it only gives you anything if you've already got board advantage, if you already have something on the board. If you don't have anything on the board, you cannot really capitalize from the Maelstrom in any way other than moving your hero twice and drawing more cards. So it didn't seem worth it because of that reason. I wouldn't blame you if you had it and if you put it in, but it should tell you something that I decided to keep Nemesis and keep Ozorix and remove the Time Maelstrom from my expensive end of the deck. Another optional thing that I put in is the Crystal Wisp. I'm really just experimenting right now. I put in the Wisp, and I put in the Fireblaze Obelisk to strengthen my early game and let me survive longer until the late game, basically. But it's just because I have no idea what else to play. Since the Silhouette Tracer got nerfed, it's no longer viable, because what you want to do with the Tracer in this deck is you want to teleport your hero to the other side of the board and then keep blasting with your stuff, with your Ankh. But since it got nerfed and you can only move 4 squares now, I don't think the Silhouette Tracer is viable anymore, so I'm experimenting with these obelisks. And these obelisk Fireblaze are much better than the 2-costing obelisks that don't give you the attack, because these obelisks, I could argue that they are the core of the deck, maybe, because they also synergize with your Rasha's Curse and your Star's Fury. If you have an obelisk on the board in the late game, they're actually really good. Now that I think of it, maybe you should actually really have them. Because if you have one on the board active in the late game, then your Star's Fury basically gets 50% more deadly in terms of getting lethal damage. It's really freaking good with an obelisk on the board. It's brilliant stuff. So they are like almost core. I would argue that they might be the core of the deck as well. whereas the Crystal Wisp, kind of experimental, not sure. You could have less Wildfire Ankhs, like you could have maybe 2 Ankhs only, and maybe 2 Ikir Stars, maybe only 2 Stars Furies, and then you may want to put in something that your imagination tells you is a good idea. I don't know. Like, you could play another variant of this deck where you have basically the Science third wish. Where's the third wish? You could have the Science third wish to give 3 friendly minions plus 3 attack for lethal damage, and then also take some... Drain Morale could be argued to be worth it, because it's both removal in terms of nerfing the enemy attack, and it's part of your lethal combo. If you play Stars Fury, Drain Morale, it could actually be really potent. And then play that, and then maybe include the... Come on, Chrome, don't be silly right now, don't be trolling me. And then include some neighbors drilling next door. Include Jack's True Sight into your deck, summon a bunch of ranged minions, and then next turn buff them with the third wish and Drain Morale, and then suddenly you're shooting for God knows how much damage and killing the enemy general in 1 turn. So that could be something you're interested in as a variation of the deck. But still keep the core that I just explained as a core. The 3 Siphon, 3 First Wish, 3 Dune Casters, 3 Pyro, at least 2 Ankhs. I would say, yeah, at least 2 Fire Blazes is like almost core. And then 3 Sand Howlers, at least 2 Staffs of Zakir, at least 2 Entropic Decay for survivability, at least 2 Stars Fury, 3 Scarabs, as many Aymar as you can get. That's basically the core of the deck, and it works really well. And you could put in the variant of Drain Morale, Third Wish, Jax, and it could also work really well. Are there any other Vetruvian cards you should be interested in? My god, that fucking drill. Brilliant timing, neighbors, brilliant timing. I think the rest of them are pretty much shit for your deck, so you shouldn't play them. Yeah, there you go. So that's the deck. Now, how do you play it? What is the absolute best opening? How do you mulligan? How do you open with this deck? Obviously, if you get a Pyromancer, if you get a Wildfire Ankh as your opening, that is the dream come true when you're going first. When you get a Dune Caster and you're going first, yeah, you can open with a Dune Caster. I mean, you can cast it, but it's a really bad opening because not only you are playing a bad minion, but you're also denying yourself the buffing potential of that Dune Caster in the later game. So, when you have to open Dune Caster, mulligan everything else. Mulligan very aggressively with this deck. If you don't have what you want, feel free to just mulligan every fucking thing. Don't save cards to play next turn in your mulligan. Always mulligan everything that you can't play. So if you basically are going first and you have a Sand Howler and a Staff of Ikir in your hand, no, mulligan that shit to give yourself the best chance you can get for a Pyromancer Wildfire Ankh. Mulligan very aggressively, and it will pay off more often than not. You are almost guaranteed anyway to have a 3-drop minion for the next turn, so you shouldn't worry about it. You shouldn't save for it. Just mulligan very aggressively. And if you're going second, mulligan even more aggressively. Like, don't save up your Stars Fury, don't save up Siphon Energies for potential removals. Mulligan everything to get the start you are happy with. The absolute best start is a Pyromancer, a Wildfire Ankh. You play the Pyromancer behind you, by the way, always behind you, never in front of you. His job is not to pick up mana, his job is to blast from behind. And you always put your blast minions in the middle row. That way, regardless of where the opponent is standing, you can always move to reach him. You never play your blast minions on anywhere else than the middle row unless you are absolutely forced to do so by the situation. So that you need to be very mindful with your positioning. You need to plan your placement of this Pyromancer so that your opponent has the smallest chance of reaching him. In the mid game, you need to get really tricky with your positioning to always body block the access to your Pyromancer if you are planning to spawn it. But basically, back to the openings, you always want to open with Ankh or a Pyromancer. If you can't, or a Obelisk behind you is also really good, or a Sand Howler in front of you. If you can't get that, mulligan very aggressively, and it's going to pay off. Now, how to play against various factions. Any specific quirks? Yes. Against Lionar, you want to... I cannot have it on the screen really nice. Okay, so against Lionar, you really want to keep the Siphon energies in your hand. Never redraw the Siphon energy. You may want to mulligan it if you don't have a good starting hand, but other than that, you keep it in your hand because it's crucial to deal with Lionar's what is that ability called? God, it's just right on the tip of my tongue. The knights, the adepts. You want to siphon their energy. It's very important. So you keep it because it's guaranteed to be useful against Lionar. It's guaranteed to be useful. The Rasha's Curse, I don't know. Maybe the Regalia will come back to fashion, but it's not very fashionable in the current metagame. So I am not feeling really bad about just dropping the Rasha's Curse whenever I feel like, not saving it for artifact removal when I'm playing against Lionar, because I haven't seen a Regalia for a long time. But if it comes back to metagame, yeah, it could be really important to have that Rasha's Curse. Those are the unique things you want to know about Lionar. And also, against Lionar, you need to be extra mindful about keeping at least one Entropic Decay in your hand. When you draw an Entropic Decay, do not redraw it in the mid or late game. You will need it. They will drop a Guardian right in your face at 310, and then you will be really praying to God for your Entropic Decay to deal with that 310 before it lethalizes you with 1310 stats next turn with the Divine Bond ridiculous bullshit. So you will really want your Entropic Decay because Lionar specializes in big minions. So keep it if you draw it. Really good stuff. Against Songhai, what to do against Songhai? Siphon energy is less important against Songhai. Yeah, there are the Chakri avatars. Other than that, I don't really silence that much against Songhai. I don't feel bad about redrawing it if I have to. The Rasha's Curse is decently important against their masks, but the mask did just get nerfed, so maybe not as much, but still it's nice to keep it for an artifact. And I would say high HP minions are very important. Aymara Healer is the absolute crucial thing against Songhai. You never redraw it. Even if you draw it in the early game, arguably. Even if you draw it in the very early game, you keep it and you wait for turns until you wait until you have 6 mana. Extremely important to have it. Because Songhai is very focused on just getting lethal damage, just brawling aggressively into your face until you run out of HP. And they also struggle with removing high HP minions. So for those two reasons, Aymara is just absolutely important. And they actually lack silence compared to other factions, Songhai. So that's another reason why the Provoke and the Dying Wish will go off more often, and it's very important. So always keep your Aymara against Songhai. Siphon Energy, not as important. Against other Vetruvians, Siphon Energy is your absolute godsend. You want 5 of them. If there was a possibility to have 5 of them in your deck, you would have 5 Siphon Energy against Vetruvian. It's that important. You never mulligan it. It does so much against Vetruvian. You will know how vulnerable to Dispel you are when you play around with this deck for a while. It's super important to have your Siphon Energy. Rasha's Curse, you almost never use it until they have their artifacts. You need to fear the Wildfire Ankh, you need to fear the Safavikir. Because... and for that reason, you keep the Rasha's Curse in your hand and wait for them to play it. Very important. Oh, and I basically forgot about one important thing. I was looking right at it. Because a lot of people will be wondering, well, if you're playing an artifact deck, shouldn't you play the Hexblade? See, I have 2 Hexblades. I crafted them for the early versions of this deck. I don't like them at all. They don't work so well. It takes a while for the Hexblade to get going. It costs 4. See, so basically you can't have it in the early game. By the time you get it in combo with your Wildfire Ankh, it's more often than not too late. Yes, sometimes you get a good Hexblade going. More often than not, it's too slow to get going, and by the time you play it, you're already bogged down by enemy minions, and it gives you nothing until you start fighting. So if you play it on your turn, and then the enemies start punching you on their turns, they still have their attack, because the way it applies is that it applies before the attack if you attack them, but it applies after the attack if they attack you. So it doesn't defend you against the enemies bogging you down in brawling melee, as well as the Staff of Akir defends you. It feels too expensive. I almost always mulliganed it because I just couldn't afford it. I didn't have time to play it. It would be too slow. It would break my momentum. I basically thought it was a great idea. It seems great on paper, until I just actually started playing it, put it into my deck, and realized that in reality, it's not nearly as good as I thought, because it's just too slow, too expensive. It's too situational. It's basically either winning you the game or being completely shit and losing you the game. You want more consistency, and you can get more consistency with other things in your deck. So yeah, you maybe want to put in one if you have it, if you happen to have it, and see how it works for you. It's cool, but it's not that good. You'd never want more than one, and even when you get that one, you will find yourself replacing it more often than not. Hexblade is not as good as you may think, so I just wanted to throw it out of the way. But because, you know, I was thinking of Russia's Curse and Vetruvian, and it actually popped into my head. So yeah, Hexblade, not so much, unless it gets nerfed. I mean buffed, unless it gets buffed. Or maybe unless something else gets nerfed, and then Hexblade becomes your next best choice. But in the current state of the metagame, I don't think it's a good idea. Against Magmar, it's really important to buff your minions above 3 attacks so that you are immune to Plasma. So keep in mind to buff your Sandhowlers. Maybe keep them in your hand until you have a buff for them, even sometimes. It's very important to get up your minions up to 4+ attack. Also, you may want to, if you have a choice between buffing one minion with the Dune Howlers to 6 attack, or buffing 2 minions to 4 attack each, you want 2 minions 4 attack each. The Magmar will struggle much more with removing those than a one big minion. Just as long as you immunize them to the Plasma Storm, you're good. Other than that, against Magmar, you just play standard and hope for the best. But yeah, you just play standard and hope for the best. And be happy every single time Magmar tries to play ranged against you. You may want to keep the Siphons more often than not against the growth minions. Sometimes a Magmar will make the mistake of trying to play the ranged game and grow his minions against you. You keep your Siphon for the growth minions, and you basically just blast them to death, and you get a really easy win. So that's how you play the matchups. Is there anything else I should cover? I think I'm good. I think this is the guide. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you know all you need to know about playing Ranged Vetruvian. As I said, it's super fun. It teaches you a lot about the game. It makes you a better player, and it also has a moderate amount of success on the ladder in the current metagame. I mean, in many different metagames. I basically went through like 3 different metagames with this deck, and I've kept sustainable success with it. So it's just overall decent. Have fun with it. Glad you enjoyed, and thank you to everyone who contributed to the success of the quarterly goal for the second quarter of 2015. I'm hoping my stream will survive long months and years ahead with your continued support, and I'll see you in the next guide, which will be released when we reach 33% of the next quarterly goal.